when it comes to business owners in general, and you and I are both business owners,
Sure.
If something's not going right, we're going to try to figure it out, and we will figure it out, and we'll move down a different path.
Yep.
The problem becomes 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years into it. We don't take enough time to get away from our business and to really look at what's the long-term goal with the business,
Sure.
right? Think of a farmer, for instance. Grandpa, my dad had the farm, so now I have the farm, and I have a son that's coming up, But is that really going to be the case? Is your son really going to come into the farming business? Or my dad that owned a plumbing business, one son went in and one didn't. And so anyway, I think business owners in general, we get so caught up, as you said, emails or whatever. We get so caught up in generating revenue, because that's why we got started, to be our own boss, and we want to generate revenue. But what are we going to do with the revenue when we're older? Is the revenue going to pass to our next generation? Are we going to sell that revenue? How are we going to establish that? And so, just this week I sat down with some business owners, and it happened not to be a family business. And when you look at the ownership change, there was no documents or anything involved. So my question is what happens if you're dead?
Yeah.
And it's silence, because it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, is your wife going to take it over, or a kid's going to take it over, or is your key man or key lady going to take it over? What's going to happen? And a lot of times people don't have those things set up. At iWealth, where I'm at, if I'm not here at this point, we have something in place called a buy-sell agreement that Sean takes over the business.
Sure.
Trudy doesn't want to run it. Trudy can't run it. She doesn't want to. So if she's, as well as she's taken care of financially, the clients need to be taken care of, and we've got people in place for that. So I think business owners need to step back and say, what if I'm not here?
Sure.
If I retire, if I get disabled, or I'm dead, where's the business going to go?
So is this something that you guys are equipped to kind of help the clients have that conversation around and kind of help guide them through? Is that what you're leaning towards?
Yeah, and we do it a lot. I primarily work with small business owners, and I love having this conversation with them because they're not doing it. So we're pulling them out of their business. A lot of times you go do your taxes, the accountant is so busy, he's not having this conversation because he's just trying to save you money this year. You go to the attorney and you say, I need a will to get you a will. They're not always having this conversation. So we're able to get our clients around the table and give them the what ifs and start having this conversation. We're not drawing up those documents. We're working with their CPA or their attorney to help them do it, or getting them to somebody that can help them. But having the conversation, being that kind of CFO for their business, outside of their business, and making them accountable to what's going to happen down the road. The biggest sin that I see from business owners is not communicating the plan. So if they finally get to a plan, but it's in their head and it's not written out or it's not communicated, go back to the farming situation. So dad and mom decide that George, their son's going to take over the farm, but you got Sally and Steve that aren't on the farm. And it might not be equal, right? It just might not be equal. The farmland's worth more or whatever, but their son has been in the farm, he's going to get it. What I've learned is that if we can have a family meeting and put those kids around the table, and dad can be the son of a gun, telling them this is what's going to happen, I have a lot better chance of those three siblings having Thanksgiving dinner together when dad and mom are gone.
Sure.
Because dad did it. Versus reading a document, dad and mom are gone, and then trying to interpret the document. It's going to say that George gets the farm, but it doesn't have the context of why from dad, right? There's not that fluffy. So I think having a family meeting, getting these business owners to think about what happens when you're not here, and then getting the legal documents in place. But lastly, having that meeting so that they communicate it is so, so important.
Yeah, and you almost have to have somebody that works kind of as an arbitrator, as a person in the room that's a third party to keep the conversation on track.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become just about the old childhood memory or she said, he said, on the negative side.
Right.
Thinking about that room and those people, is it one conversation or is this a series of conversations? Or is it this usually plays out over the course of a year or two to get to the point that everyone's at the table? Talk me through that part of the process. How does it work for most of these small businesses?
Yeah, for the most part, it starts with us and that business owner, the husband and wife or whoever owns that business, having this conversation about what's the next generation or what's it look like? What's your exit strategy? Do you have legal documents? You get that stuff in order. Then after it's in order, a lot of times they have it in their head that they're going to do what they're going to do. So it doesn't matter what, the 3 kids say. Then after it's in order, it's basically just one meeting, but it could be 2 hours long where you sit them down and you can go through the assets. You can say, this is what mom and dad have. This is where it is. And I typically go through that piece of it.
Sure.
But then when it comes about who's going to receive what, and a lot of times it's dad or mom having that conversation, and the kids understand their parents better than that legal document. And so even if they're not happy, at least it's mom and dad doing it so those siblings continue to get along.
Sure.
Families get ripped apart all the time over money, businesses, and things like that. So communication is the number one thing. If it lacks communication, it's going to be a hard time for those kids to get along after the fact. And so I just think that family meeting is just so important. And I don't think that there's an age either. You could be in your 50s, not want to retire until your mid-60s, but have a successful business. You should start having these conversations earlier, and then things can change. I mean, you might have the conversation, and all of a sudden somebody who's off the farm might say, I want to come back on the farm. How would that work? And you can start to open up that dialogue or whatever. I continue to use farmers, but it can be any business. It's just an interesting part. It's a part that I love about the business that I'm in, to be able to help facilitate these meetings.
The part that I think is super interesting about it is when you work as a facilitator and you do have dad that's saying, here's my game plan for how I would like my estate settled out. It comes from a place of transferring that responsibility instead of, as a kid, dad passes away or grandpa passes away, and all of a sudden the grandkids are viewing it as a jackpot in the lottery, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's that responsibility transfer that can happen in that type of meeting, that if the parent or the grandparent is still around, all of a sudden it's, here's this pot of money or here's this chunk of responsibility instead of here's this jackpot or this lottery win.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that when the person is still alive and there in the room, face to face, toe to toe in the meeting.
Yeah. And what's been eye-opening for me over the last 20 plus years of doing this is I always thought it would be the kids that would be uneasy and mad at mom and dad or whatever.
I hope it's the parents.
You know what the biggest hurdle is? The biggest hurdle is to be able to get mom and dad to open up.
Yeah.
To even have the meeting.
Yeah.
And not always do we share the financials. It doesn't have to, but most of the time we do. But they're uneasy with it, or they haven't gotten to the point where they even have a plan.
Sure.
But once we get them to have a plan, it's a hurdle to say we're going to bring them in here because they're, one, either think the kids don't want to hear it, or two, it's really uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
But if I can get them to have the meeting, it's typically not the kids that are mad or leave upset. I really haven't had that piece of it. It's just getting mom and dad across that we got to have it. We've got to tell these kids what's going to happen. Yeah, it's just one of those things it can be a really tough conversation. Now, once you have it, it's great. Everybody leaves the room typically feels great.
That's where you get the Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly. And I tell clients that, but I think it clicks. If it's coming from mom and dad, we just have a better chance of those kids getting together for Thanksgiving. We've seen families ripped apart. Doesn't even have to be over a business, but you just have to be able to communicate. And we've been taught forever that we don't talk about finances, right?
Absolutely
not. I don't run around with the number on my back that says this is my net worth, and you don't either. We're not supposed to talk about it.
Yep.
But you can talk about it with your kids. You can have that conversation with your kids if they, and if those kids don't act the way you want, then set up the right vehicle so they can't get it all. You can give them the money, but set up a vehicle where they can get a little bit every year out of it, and not just go waste it.
Not go ruin their life.
That's a whole different conversation. But again, communication is so key.
Well, thank you.